Hi and welcome to the video. This is the first in what I expect to be probably quite a long running series of videos that I'm going to be making about this car, and it's basically the 1/6 new Bright Jeep Wrangler TJ that was made a few years ago. I've been at this project a while. It's kind of gone on pause because I was waiting for a software update to the transmitter I'm using, but I'll probably come on to that in more detail in another video. But in the first place, what I wanted to do in this first video is just give you an overview of where I've got to so far. So the car itself is actually pretty huge. I've got a tape measure here somewhere. Here we go. So it's measuring about 25 inches long, and even though I've narrowed it, and about just under a foot wide, so it's a pretty large model. In terms of the scale, because I did check it out when I first got it, it's almost precisely 1/6 scale. And just to give you some idea on how it compares with some other models of the Jeep Wrangler, because I've got loads including the real car, I'll just show you. So this one here is the Tamiya YJ, which is the model that came out before the TJ, which is this one, and you can see there's quite a size difference. In terms of the length, this one's about 17 inches by 8 inches wide, and that comes out closer to 1/9 scale than the Tamiya advertised 10th scale. And I do have the little version of the new Bright Jeep. I'll just move this one out of the way. And this one is much closer to 10th scale, and again I've actually narrowed this one as well, and perhaps I'll do another video on that at some point. And this one is about 16 inches by about 7, so it's a little bit smaller. Because it took so long for the radio software to receive its update, in the meantime I actually came across another one of these body shells, because they're quite rare, and this is a different version of the new Bright, and that is here. Probably going to pull the camera a little bit back so that you can see it. And this one here has got a very similar moulding to this. The main difference is it comes with a better roll cage, and it actually has the windows as well. So in the first place, the bumper is much more realistic. In the first place, what I'm going to do is I'm going to carry on with this car and the modifications that I was doing to it, but actually this one will provide me some reference. I'll decide in the future whether or not I'm actually going to use this body, or maybe I'll sell it or something, I'm not sure. Okay, right, so in terms of our overview, I have started some work on this car. So the wheel arches, which started off rather like this wide, I was wanting to make a car more like my own, so I actually chopped these off, took a piece out and stuck them back on again, and I'm much happier with this more standard narrow width. Started making the sideboards as well, making those out of plastic card. The front lights on this one, I didn't really like the way they came, and actually they had these lights which curve, whereas the real lights are set in a bit. So I made these actually out of the front of 2 torches, and when I take the bonnet off in a minute you'll see what I did. Started making a bumper again. I'll be putting the end parts on to make it more realistic. This one was going to be black, but I think that given that I've got the other body, I don't think it will be. I might make it red or something. The roll cage that came with this version, I didn't particularly like. It was a soft plastic affair, so I actually made something out of copper pipe which I bent and soldered together using a mini blowtorch. The other thing which I've done to the body is I've cut out the grills. Again, I think that looks better than the sort of moulded in curved radiator that sits behind on the original one. It's quite hard to see in the picture. Maybe you can see it better there. And with a hacksaw and a very fine little saw that goes in the end of a knife blade, I actually cut all the way around, and I made it so that the bonnet can come out and I can get to everything underneath. So I'll just lift this off. Right, so you can start to see the gubbins, and I'll take you through the chassis in a minute. As ever, there are lots of things to be plugged in. I've got the receiver down on the chassis, so anything on the body that I want to plug in, so for instance I've got a switch here that turns the lights on, needs to be plugged in, and what I do is I label them up using Tamiya masking tape, which never comes off, which is really great, but it's easy to pull off if you want to, and a permanent marking pen, and then I just write on both ends of the terminal what it does. So when I take the body off, it's quick to do and it's quick to put together again. Right, okay, so that's kind of an overview of the body and where it's got to so far. It is I'm going to get some features to it. So I've already put a servo behind inside the dashboard, and I'm going to have the steering wheel move when the car steers. And in terms of characters being precisely 1/6 scale, it means that the car is basically the same scale as in the UK Action Man, or in the United States G.I. Joe. So I've got a couple of them here, and I cut out the floor wells and I actually lowered the seats slightly. They actually fit in there quite well. Okay. And so he'll be in there, he'll be steering. I'm thinking about putting a rod up through inside him to the head, so that when he's steering, he'll look left and right. And I'm going to be putting a Y lead on the gear change servo, which again I'll come to in a minute, so that when the car goes from high to low gear, his arm will move with it and change gear. Just really a bit of fun. If you're going to be building this scale, you can actually start to add features in like that. Okay, so before I take the body off, I'll just give you a quick demonstration of the things that work so far. I'll just put the car up in the air, because that way the wheels won't touch the ground. That's it. So the radio control unit which I'm using is the Spektrum DX6R, and I'm planning to do a separate video actually on how I program this thing. Really pleased with this transmitter. In terms of turning on, the transmitter's already on, so just plug him in. Okay, so we're all live and ready to go. If I want to turn the lights, which also gives power to the sound system on, I can do so. You can see the lights there. The torch lights are actually quite bright. We've got steering, we've got throttle forwards and reverse with brake in between. We've got gear change, which is, at the moment we're in the low ratio, and there we go, into the higher ratio. Those actually give quite good speeds. At the moment we've got a 540 motor in there. We might end up with something bigger at some point. The car will have indicators. I'll be putting another lighting unit into it, and the other feature is sound. What I've done is I've put that onto a separate channel so that I can choose to have the car going along with the lights on, with or without the sound. So if I put the mix on for the sound, which is that, then I can start it up. Backwards. Quite happy with that sound, and if I want to, I can just rev the engine independently. Okay, so that's all of that. Now, if I take the body off, and I will briefly try and show you how I mounted it, because mounting bodies can often prove to be a challenge. First thing to do is to unplug everything which connects the top to the bottom. And I'll just lift the body off. It should just come. That's it. Okay, and what I've done is, I'll just put this over here a second. I've put some bits of metal underneath here that locate onto the back of the chassis, and here there's a plate across the front, and a bolt comes down from this cross member here. So it's just one nut and two bolts to get the body on and off. I've always found in the past that it's a mistake to have a model that's really hard to get the body on and off. Okay, so I'll just take you briefly through the features of this. I'll go from back to front. So at this end here, the car is basically running on Axial Wraith mechanics. So Axial Wraith axles back and front. The differentials, both ends, are unlocked, so I had to buy an extra kit to put inside the differential here in order for that to happen. The car just wouldn't steer, it was too heavy if I tried to use locked differentials. Because it is so heavy, it kind of goes quite nicely and it doesn't have trouble slipping. For the wheels and tyres, the wheels themselves have got little valves in them, and you actually pump them up with a hand pump. So these tyres here haven't got any foams in them at all, they're just filled with air, and that I found enabled me to get the best kind of grip, shape and support for the car. So I'm quite pleased with that. So that's the wheels and the tyres. The tyres that I put on it aren't the ones that came with the wheels, but you can put any 2.2 tyres on these wheels, so those are pretty good. I think they're a fairly recent innovation. The chassis itself, the chassis bars here are actually intended for a conversion of an Axial SCX10 into a 6x6, i.e. two wheels at the back and one wheel at the front kind of configuration, but because it makes the chassis that much longer, it's just the right size to fit underneath this car. For the cross members here, I just used some scrap box section aluminium that actually came out of a broken handle from a small suitcase. So these were quite a good size, and and I just put some threaded rod through here, and then there are nuts each end to hold it together. I am using standard Wraith upgraded suspension arms here, but I'm using the alloy ones. It was quite difficult to source long enough universal drive shafts. This one here I think is an RC four-wheel drive one. The one which I put on the front, which is even longer, it doesn't say the make. You can get these on the internet, but it's kind of the longest version. The gearbox is it's either an RC four-wheel drive or a copy of it, and it's basically 2-speed transmission. And if I just move the camera and focus in on it for a second, I'll just show you it changing gear while it's running. So I'll use the trim to speed up the car. So here we go. That's in the low ratio, and that's the high ratio, and back to the low ratio. Okay, that's back to neutral. Might as well take the power out at this point. Okay, moving forward, you can see that I use some aluminium pieces which I got from the local hardware store, just angle pieces to kind of make the pieces of chassis that I wanted. The skid plate here is a standard Axial Wraith one, so that actually went in quite easily. I'm using a 5,000 amp hour nickel metal hydride battery, that's fine. This is one of those 1060 I think it's Hobby Wing speed controllers. I've just found them to be absolutely brilliant. I've put it on so that it's double tap reverse. That I prefer as a setup. I'm using I'm just trying to see what make. I can't see what the make is, but I'm using a very heavy duty servo for the gear change, because I found that anything less than this, and this one here is, I think it's 20 kg, anything less than that just kind of burnt out, and it wouldn't have it. I'm using a Castle Creations Beck, so I'm not using the Beck that's in the speed controller. I've bypassed that by chopping the red wire coming out of the speed controller to the receiver, and this way I've got enough power to confidently power the servos, and I'll be having a lot more servos if I do the stuff inside the car. Got a 540 motor on there for the time being. I'll see if that's okay. If it isn't, I may find myself maybe going to a 550. I'm not sure what the compatibility is with the gearbox. The gearbox which I've got on the front of the motor is one of those inline affairs. I think it's either a 4:1 or a 5:1 ratio, so it's not that high a ratio, but it all seems to be working okay. And the front servo is quite a high spec one. It's a high-tech titanium geared 7955 TG, and that is a powerful servo. You kind of need that on the front of the car, and that I think pretty well takes you through to the overview. In the next video, what I plan to be doing is taking a more detailed look at the DX6R and the programming for it. Well, I hope you found this interesting so far, and thank you for watching.